he doesn't have.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'm gonna let folks in.
Okay.
And then we're totally starting.
I need to turn my camera off. How do I turn my camera off?
Sí, exacto. Y um,
Hi, Darius. Hi, Jella.
yes.
Hi, Catherine. Welcome. We are going to get started here. I want to kick it off and say just welcome to our April 25th, 2024 Community Advisory Group meeting. We're having a kind of hybrid meeting alongside our community open house, which is happening in the room right behind me. So for folks who weren't able to join in person, just really appreciate you joining here. Before I get too far into it, I'm going to hand it over to Francisco to go over the interpretation channel.
Good evening, everyone. Francisco Picado from Language Access LLC. It's a pleasure for us to be providing interpretation today. As with most meetings organized by the city, interpretation is available to maximize the participation of most residents. And in case you haven't gotten a chance to use the interpretation feature, you click on in a minute you'll be able to see the globe on the bottom right of your screen. You click on the globe and select the language of your choice. Buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos. Como la mayoría de programas que organiza la ciudad, ofrece interpretación al español. Para aquellos de ustedes que no han tenido la oportunidad de usar este servicio, por favor, pulse el globito en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla y seleccione el idioma de su preferencia. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. All right. So we have interpretation set up. Make sure, even if you're listening in English, to opt into the English channel so that you can have two-way communication with anyone who's speaking Spanish through the interpreter. And with that, I am going to hand it off to the wonderful Beth Vogelsang from OV Consulting to get us started with updates on the GES improvement project. So handing it over to Beth.
Okay, hello everyone. So I have a little bit of a voice issue, but I will do my best here to get through it all this evening. So we can go ahead and go to the larger map. Okay, so we are just kind of giving you a quick overview today of all of the efforts that are underway in this area, and reminder that this is somewhere in the ballpark of 600 million or higher of all of this kind of work that is underway. So you'll see references to some of the street improvements like 54th and 58th. And then as you work your way down the map, you'll see the Globeville levee as a phased improvement with those kinds of things starting at the end of summer, first of fall. And then we see Washington Street. And we all know that we're going to talk about that a little bit more here, but that is in final design and ready to begin construction in 2025. And tied to that is First Avenue. Then as you make your way south on the map, you'll see the 48th Avenue Greenway with the new outfall to the river, all of that coming out of the stormwater study and addressing the flow of water across Globeville, collecting that and getting it to the river. Then associated with the river, there's also the water project, which is the Army Corps of Engineers effort that will also be starting in the next year and looking at different reaches of the river. So all of our levee work in coordination with that larger effort eventually. And then as you kind of make your way south of I-70, you see some reference to some of the smaller projects, but very important. So the I-70 underpass, pedestrian improvements and lighting that will be taking place in late summer, early fall. 44th and Pearl Park is an opportunity to put in a new park in what was the tiny homes location. And that property has been acquired by Parks and will at some point start moving in that direction. And then we have our improvements over 44th, over the I-25 bridge that are pedestrian enhancements that are coming, which I'm going to share a few pictures of with you. And then we have, of course, the National Western work that's underway. So what's super exciting is that we've been in planning and then into design, and that all of these projects in one form or another are going to be moving toward construction. So I want to move us to the next slide, which is really kind of an overview of the construction work that's coming. Okay, so the yellow or the orange-ish reddish color are all the projects that should be starting up in 2024. And so you'll see that, for instance, Denver Water is going to be replacing the water line in Washington later this summer. That's supposed to be a 2 to 3 month type of project with most of the work done in the evening. So that's something that we'll begin communicating more on here soon. The Lincoln Underpass, like I mentioned, some of the NewCo efforts will be underway this year. Franklin Bridge has some improvements coming on the north end of our area, and then 58th Avenue as well. Then you'll see the next round of projects really are moving into the 2025 timeframe. So Washington Street, 51st, 48th project, the Greenway, and more of the outfall work. All of that moves into 2025. And then you'll see the last are some of those that are staged more for 2026, like the Betty Cram Bridge. We're going to talk a little bit more about the funding of some of those here shortly. So we have a lot coming to this area. And so one of the big efforts by OCBE and ourselves will be to begin a very active communication effort on all of these projects, and really trying to pay attention to what the impacts to community will be. If you go to the next slide, this is an example of 44th. I mentioned that sidewalk improvements over the I-25 bridge down to 45th and around, and then stair improvements down to 44th. This is all going in, and my understanding is that the road is opening up again tomorrow, which would be fabulous. It's been closed, and of course, those construction impacts have been felt. So this is a great example of how we're going to have to really get ahead of some of these things, pay attention, and support our local properties as we move into construction over the next years. I'm happy to take any particular questions about any of these projects.
Any questions for folks?
I have a question. Sorry, it took me a while to find the right button. This is Catherine White with the GES Gazette neighborhood newspaper. What kinds of tools will be available from the city for businesses to mitigate the construction impacts?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so that is something that is at the forefront. Hold on one second. Okay, all right, we're gonna try that again. Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, and no music. So yeah, so it's going to be really critical. And I will tell you that right now we don't have the perfect answer, but we learned a lot here at 44th and working with Prodigy and some of the other businesses that have been impacted by that construction. And so before we head into these next bigger rounds, we're going to be looking at what are the support services. How do we ensure that access is maintained? How do we message that? Are businesses aware? Are we communicating and getting out ahead of it? And have we explored options to be in place during construction? So unfortunately, we're still ahead of, well, fortunately, we're still ahead of a lot of others that are coming. But we don't have specific answers yet for those details. But working with DDO, of course.
Who's the best person for me to reach out to sooner to when construction starts, just to follow up on what you've come up with, once you've had a chance to think it through?
So I think probably the best person will be Chris Callanan at
Okay.
OBE. But
Yeah.
we'll all be working together, and we will hopefully be bringing this information to the CAG on a regular basis.
Great. Thanks.
Anyone else in particular about this topic? All right. Okay, so I think I'll move us along, and Nuco has an update for us as well.
Hello, everyone. I am Mike Bouchard. I am the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center. And we are, oh, that helps. Sorry. Could you go to the next slide, please? Yes, we are building out phases 1 and 2 of the National Western Center campus, as shown here. And so I wanted to take a little bit of time tonight to give you all an update on the recent grant award that the city received from the U.S. Department of Transportation, and how it relates to our campus, the projects that are part of phases 1 and 2, and what this funding means for the timeline to get some of these projects done sooner than we otherwise would have been able to. So if we go to the next slide, please. And the next. Okay, so this all started last fall, is when the grant became available. We had a very short timeline to put our grant proposal together. And so I wanted to give a little bit of background on what the grant is, where it comes from, and what really the dollars can and can't be used for. So this is a U.S. Department of Transportation grant program called Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods. It's through the U.S. DOT. So it's a federal grant award. 132 communities were awarded in this most recent round. Over $3 billion of investment from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the IIJA. This is one of the signature pieces of legislation from this administration, and these dollars represent getting those infrastructure investment dollars to local communities to get work done on the ground. Now, given that this is the Department of Transportation, these dollars are fairly specific on what they can be used for, and they are to plan or construct transportation projects that do one of the following 4 things: improve access to daily needs such as jobs, education, healthcare, food, and recreation; foster equitable development and restoration; reconnect communities by removing, retrofitting, or mitigating highways or other transportation facilities that create barriers to community connectivity, mobility, access, or economic development; and finally, prioritizing disadvantaged communities. So I know that there were some questions that we've received from members of the community. Where are these dollars going? Are they going to CDOT? How many dollars are coming directly to the community? And I just want to kind of clarify that the type of dollars these are and the uses that they can be applied to really are this list. So there are no dollars going to CDOT. This is a direct grant to the city. And again, due to the nature of the color of money and the way these dollars are being distributed, they're going to build infrastructure projects and not directly to the community for community use. So if you go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about what the projects are. So there's 4 projects that are funded. And part of the way these grants work is the federal government requires a certain level of local match. So they don't just give us free money to go and build an entire project. They expect us as the local entity to provide significant dollars of our own to match the federal dollars that are awarded. So in this case, we are just under providing about 50% match. So you can see the total cost of all 4 projects is $68 million. The grant award was $35.4 million. And if you do the math, it means that the city is bringing $32.7 million in match to the table to match the 35 from the federal government. The 4 projects that are being funded as part of this are listed here. So the first is Betty Cram Drive Bridge and the 48th Avenue Greenway that Beth just discussed. The second is the new pedestrian bridge, number 2, that crosses actually 3 separate railroad entities and will connect the RTD commuter rail station to the west side of the tracks, to the National Western campus, and ultimately over the bridges over the Platte to Globeville. Number 3 are improvements at the at-grade rail crossing at National Western Drive South. As part of the campus development, we were actually able to remove, there were 13 at-grade crossings when we started. And as part of the redevelopment that we have led, we have removed 11 of those. There are 2 remaining, and this is one of them. And this just under $500,000 will allow us to do pedestrian and bike safety improvements at this crossing to make that portion of the campus safer. And then finally, and most excitingly, the DPS bus barn site shown here at number 4, it's that red box just off Brighton Boulevard, just to the east of Brighton and just south of the post office. That was historically a landfill site. We have done some work as part of campus redevelopment to put in some methane mitigation and monitoring, but the cleanup of that site was not able to be fully funded until we received this grant. So we are very excited to be able to use these dollars to fully clean up this site. It's about 7.5 acres. And once it is cleaned up, it will be part of what we call the future phases redevelopment of the campus. And that is the triangular area to the east of the tracks. That will be part of the National Western future phases that we will be engaging with the community later this year to discuss the vision for how that area wants to redevelop and how we can meet community goals and needs through that process. So I think the overall message here is that these are federal dollars that are specific to fund infrastructure. We were able to leverage them to bring additional money to the city to build out these important connectivity projects much sooner than would otherwise have been feasible. If we had to find this $35.4 million ourselves as the city, it would have taken several more years of appropriation and allocation of dollars and resources to make that possible. And this grant allows us to do all 4 of these projects sooner and to complete the campus vision that was set through planning documents over a decade ago. And this allows us to finally fully fund and build out these important connections. Next slide. So a little bit about the timeline of how this all came together. Back in August, we started looking at what the opportunities were for this grant citywide and quickly identified these 4 projects as a we felt very competitive grant application. So in September, we began grant writing and grant advocacy. It's quite a lot of work to put together a proposal for a grant like this. And so there was quite a lot of effort put into that in September. We did issue a letter, send a letter to the CAC, which is the Community Advisory Committee. that the National Western Center Authority hosts, informing them that we were pursuing this grant. But given the timeline and sort of the short turnaround to prepare the proposal, we didn't have a lot of time to do more robust community engagement and information about what this grant was and what it wasn't. So from October to February, the U.S. Department of Transportation was reviewing this grant. We had our congressional delegation advocating for us. So Diana DeGette and John Hickenlooper, Michael Bennett, were all in Washington advocating with the Department of Transportation to award us this grant, communicating to them why it was important, why these connections in particular in these neighborhoods really represented a lot of the goals of the grant that were expressed on that first slide, and that this grant is really using infrastructure and funding infrastructure improvements to start to heal some of the damage that historically had been done by infrastructure in the past. So I-25, I-70, these big major transportation projects really did a lot of damage to Globeville and Elyria-Swansea. And this grant is a small but important first step to making and repairing some of those important connections. So in March, we were very fortunate to be awarded the grant. There was a public announcement that went out and a press release. In April, right now, we've had several visits from some folks from Washington to highlight and celebrate the grant. We are working on a public information plan right now. And as we look towards May and beyond the rest of this year, we will be negotiating and finalizing that grant agreement with the Department of Transportation. We will be finalizing our public information plan and then implementing it. So there'll be a lot more information coming out throughout the rest of the year on all 4 projects, the timing, what we're going to do, how we're going to deliver these projects, and it will be incorporated in part of what Beth went through in terms of the DOTI updates, and really looking to have a more comprehensive updates of all the construction projects that are happening in GES, so that all residents have a complete picture of all the work that's going on and all the outreach that will be going on around it. So with that, I'm going to stop and see if there are specific questions about the Reconnected Communities grant.
Hey, Mike, this is Catherine again from
Yes.
the Gazette. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
I have a cold. Sorry, I sound so bad. Hey, you mentioned that back in August, a group of city folks sat down to analyze what types of projects could be included in this application. Who were those kinds of city folks? Like what departments? What?
Sure. So it was DOTI. It was the mayor's office. It was the chief projects office to begin with. And then we were brought in, I think, when National Western Center and some of these projects were identified as potential candidates, we were brought into the discussion.
Got it. Thanks. Appreciate
Sure.
it.
Of course. Okay. If there are no other questions, then look for more information from us later this summer as we finalize our grant agreement and have more public information available. But thank you for your time today. Are we done? Are we turning it over to you?
Yep.
Okay. I will now bring up Mark Gonzalez.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the second part of this discussion. A big part of what our in-person meeting is and here virtually is we want to talk through, this is kind of, we're at the end stage of the Washington Street design. After all this time that we've been talking about Washington Street, we're now at the end of design. So we kind of want to talk through where we ended up, some of the feedback, especially a lot of the feedback that we received and how we try to incorporate that into our design. I know Beth already kind of talked through kind of overall construction schedule looks like, but we're just going to talk through where we ended up and what you can expect, the types of things you can expect when we get to construction. So this is kind of a exhibit of what our cross-section with the amenity zone could look like. So everything from the types of trees, from pedestrian lighting. We did end up, most of the space is gonna have 10-foot multi-use or shared use sidewalk. There are areas are gonna have 12-foot shared use sidewalk, depending on buildings next to it. We're ensure there's enough space. You can see, we're looking at some really cool kind of etching into some of the concrete around the planters. You can see that around where the kind of people are sitting. We want to create space to sit, to socialize, to be present. There in the center, you can see there's kind of a historical kind of interpretation or environmental interpretation. There are these signs that we're looking at, trying to include something along these lines in the area, in these amenity zones. They're going to highlight Globeville and the area and the history and the environmental and the context of how we got here, and trying to highlight and celebrate the history of the area. So we're going to be looking at putting some signs like that along the area. But I think one of the biggest things looking at is just really, the green, right? The trees, the shrubs, both tall planters, small planters, understory, I think is what it's officially called. But really this just dynamic that's going to be vastly different from what you see today. This is the goal. So you see parking on this exhibit. There isn't going to be parking everywhere on the corridor. We'll go through a slide that kind of looks through some of the individual blocks here in a minute. But this is really a take on what we're looking at here, both etched or patterns in the sidewalk. I mean, really trying to make this beautiful, really trying to make this an amazing place that we want to be, and we want to walk and we want to socialize and be present in. So these next few slides, we'll just kind of show, we call this a roll plot. This is really just the exhibit, the picture of what we're building in the area. Now this picture is online, so you're welcome to go to our website. And you can look at this in much more detail. You can zoom in. It's a pretty high resolution graphic, so you can scroll in and see a lot of detail. I want you to go one more for me. And so I'll just kind of talk through briefly. This is the stretch here from around 49th to 50th. You can see there's a few things in this graph. I'll just kind of highlight, the general yellow, that's sidewalk. This is all the new sidewalk or driveways that the project's gonna be building as a part of the process. So everything along this corridor, 47th, 52nd, can get brand new sidewalk. Most of it's 10-foot, some of it is 12-foot use. That does not include the space where the amenity zone is. That's roughly 6 to 8 feet, depending on where we're at on the corridor. But we're looking at plugging in a ton of new trees, a ton of new shrubs and bushes and any planters we can fit. So these big green circles are trees on the exhibit. If it just shows like a yellow kind of hatched off area, that yellow is what's going to have some type of green infrastructure. So we're going to be collecting groundwater, we're going to be filtrating that water, we're going to be putting it back into our system after the plants that we've put in there are kind of collecting and cleaning it naturally, right? I know one of the things that we've heard a lot from the feedback, other than wanting shade and trees, is we're having a care for both the environment and what that looks like, and a lot of our planters specifically target this environmental focus that we really wanted to have along the corridor. So you can see throughout this, right, you're welcome to pull up this exhibit in detail, but there's gonna be new driveways along the corridor, right, sidewalks everywhere. A lot of the intersections are all gonna have bulb outs where we could fit them. Of course, we have to still accommodate the truck use that's going to be on this corridor. So there's kind of this balance between accommodating trucks being able to make a turn while still trying to put these crossings in places that are very visible, that are easy to be seen by those around you, that are safe to cross. Want to make sure this is a place you want to be. That's another reason why you do have this mini zone, kind of creating separation from the walking path or the biking path from where the vehicles are. Yeah, we go to the next slide here. This is just kind of, this is here on the north end. So we'll go all the way to 52nd. Now we can talk through 51st if we have questions on that as well. But the reason the 51st intersection is kind of grayed out is because it's a separate project, right? Similarly to how we were talking about the 40th Greenway or the Reconnecting Communities grant, how there was a federal funding attached with the other project. There's federal funding attached to Washington Street. And so the 51st intersection is being done by a different project, a different effort. And so that's kind of why it's grayed out on this exhibit. It's kind of specific to Washington Street. But we are looking at relining the intersection and hopefully starting that towards the beginning of next year, right after the stock show. So you can see there's Washington Street. We're going to, making sure that we're keeping this planting wherever we have space and keeping this access open. Now I kind of talked through amenity zone and kind of the overall exhibit. I am going to pause here. If there are any thoughts or questions on Washington Street, I'll take some on 51st if you have them, but on Washington Street and if there's anything, I'm happy to chime in. Excellent. Next slide. Yeah, and so these are some of our signs that we're looking at. Once again, these are signs that are going to be on our website. You're welcome to go look on the both the Washington Street specific or the Washington Program of Projects website that we've linked you to. If you have questions, feel free to email Chris or email back to have you got this invite where we can point you in the right direction. These are ideas. These are not necessarily exactly what's going in there. These are ideas that we've had about things that we can highlight and talk about. One of the things that we're asking anybody who was here in person was, hey, put a sticky note on this sign and tell us what you think about it. Tell us what could be different or what you'd like to add. So as same ask of anyone who's chiming in virtually, send an email. Let us know what you think could be different, could be added more, could be had less of. We're open to feedback on exactly what these signs entail. These are examples, so you're welcome to go to our website, pull them up, take a look at them. Let us know any feedback you might have. We are still open and welcome to any feedback we have. And then I'll let Beth speak into historic interpretation a little bit.
All right, so this is the last thing here this evening is I just want to draw your attention to the fact that of all these kinds of signs that we're looking at on Washington, we have the potential to put out some historic signage, and the map that you see on the right are all the potential locations. In the end, we probably cannot have that many, but these are the ideas. And we're going to put something in the chat. We're going to put in a PDF that has the full story associated with these topics. So there, if you look at number 1, for instance, you can see it down by the railroads. It's a historic story about the early railroads in this area. Number 2 is about the founding of Globeville, also located down at the south end of the map. So when you look at the PDF, you'll get the full story in the text that's there, just too much for a slide. And we would love to know if there's particular stories that you really like, or some that you in particular do not want to share as part of this industrial corridor history that we're trying to capture. So if you go to the next slide. So there's a few others, and again, the wording is not included on this slide, but it will be in the PDF. So, we've got the sheep bridge and the sheep meat packing industry. That was really big historical aspect of Washington Street in particular in Globeville. The evolution of the community and the immigrants that came to this neighborhood over the years. Sanguinetti Farm located up at the north end, but we've highlighted some of these in the text. Next slide. And then the Globeville School, the smelting industry, which was, a very big part of this neighborhood. The interurban railroad and some of our transportation. And then, of course, the marketplace and our other commercial uses along the corridor. So take a look when you can at the stories that exist now, and let us know if there are any others that would be of interest. We are working with Historic Denver to validate and confirm all the information that would ever go on a site, but we would love to hear your thoughts on these things. So with that, I'm probably going to let Chris close out our meeting, but are there any questions about the history or the environmental signage concepts that we'll be considering as we go forward in construction? All right. Well, with that, I'll let Chris close us out then.
Thanks, Beth. And thank you, everybody, for making some time in your evening to learn more about the project and some of the updates that we have here at Dottie to share. I know that we had some interest in the virtual meeting. So glad that we were able to kind of put something together and give this opportunity to share out here. As usual, we'll have a recording of this meeting posted to the Dottie YouTube. It's Denver Dottie is the YouTube channel. So that'll be in English and Spanish for you to review, and feel free to share those videos and meeting recordings with your community, your network, anyone who you think might be interested in learning more. I know that for me, coming into specifically this process with the Washington Street corridor reconstruction, partially the way through, I don't have a full appreciation for how long the planning and design process has been going on, but I am certainly sitting here today, this evening, and looking out over the Washington Street corridor, and it is hard to believe how needed these improvements are and how excited we should be to have these benefits coming to this area. So very excited. As always, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or if you'd like to be connected with any of our team members here at Dottie. And one last kind of logistical note, we had an issue where we can't quite upload the PDF to the Zoom meeting chat. So there will be a follow-up email where we'll share the links to the meeting recordings as well as the PDF documents. And we'll be in touch. Our next scheduled CAG meeting is on July 25th, 2024. And that will likely be a virtual CAG meeting. So not this kind of split system. It'll be full virtual. We'll be back to that format. And I think with that, we're all set. So I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your evening and stay in touch. Thanks, everyone.